another. Well, our invocation this morning as we begin our worship service is entitled, Come, All You Who Seek Truth and Abide in Love. It's written by Reverend Dorothy Baruch. She writes, Come, all you who seek truth, abide in love and honor peace. Enter into this house with thanksgiving. Come into these gates with praise. Enter into this sacred space, all you who hunger for righteousness. Through these virtual doors, all footsteps lead to the source of our being, where we shall be filled. For as we come together, as we congregate for holy purposes, two essences are required. First, the assemblage of the faithful, the numberless, nameless throng of seekers. Second, the ineffable presence, the numinous, infinite divine. We invoke both entities. We beckon to the worshiper to join the consecrated rites, and we summon the Spirit of love, the eternal God of all creation. Come, let us worship together. I want to invite you to draw near those chalices or candles, perhaps, and something to light them with as we read together our chalice lighting words. We kindle this flame, symbol of our faith, for the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of love which calls us to work for justice.
Good morning. My name is Barbara Metz, and I am your worship associate this morning. I hope you are ready to settle into some time to nourish your soul, your mind, and your spirit. And I hope you are truly able to set this time apart from the rest of your life that has been mostly confined to your home, to hold this time as your sacred time, to hold it as your true Sabbath. It's so good to see everyone in their little square on my screen. You, part of the gallery that pops up upon my screen when I'm not talking. I feel like this gallery allows us to get a little glimpse into each other's homes and hideouts, to see a snapshot of each other's backgrounds, giving us a certain individuality that we don't get when we're all sitting together in the sanctuary in Chandler. It's a unique feeling of intimacy. And it's sort of my one of my little silver linings of this is how we're doing worship right now. As we have moved into Zoom services, our usual announcements that we as worship associates make about our calming room, about the service, the welcome circle after services, pastoral care associates, all of that sort of become unnecessary. But when we are sitting together in our sanctuary, we always make a point to give a special welcome to any newcomers or visitors, to make them feel as welcome as possible. And it has occurred to me, and made actually not more than occurred to me, because I know that we have visitors with us, not our usual attendees, who have found us online or through someone who is already connected to VUU, like Andy's in-laws. We want you to know that you are welcome into our community, this liberal religious community where we take pride in embracing everyone, all colors, all ethnicities, all social, economic variances, gay, lesbian, transgender, still exploring, however you dress, whomever you love, however you have defined your family, you are welcome at VUU. And we hope that when the day finally comes that we may again gather in sanctuary, that you will consider joining us in person. If you are one of those that are just now finding us, please know that Reverend Andy would love to talk with you, answer questions. He would welcome sharing a cup of coffee with you over Zoom. Please send him an email or call the church office to arrange a time. We hope that you find with us something that feeds your spirit. We hope that you feel welcome here, and thank you for joining us this morning. Reverend Andy's sermon titled Taoism is Teaching on Unity with Nature caused me to reflect on my life as a gardener. So here, without getting very philosophical, is my reflection. I wasn't much of a gardener before I moved to Connecticut. But when you're surrounded by lush green, powerful, plentiful water, others with massive personal vegetable gardens, and you happen to live across the road from a beautiful Victorian house owned by two master gardeners, and you have almost an acre of land, it seems only right that you should plant some gardens. So plant a garden I did. And just a side note to my personal quirks, when I decide to do something, anyone who knows me very well will confirm that once I've made a decision, I move. There's no reason to analyze. Don't think it over too much. Don't overwork it, because it's going to work out. I think I don't like making decisions, so I just make them quickly. So a garden. Nice big open spot on the side of the house, plenty of room. It'll look really nice to have something growing there. Some color, some veggies, stuff. Never mind, it doesn't get much sun. And I'm not talking about Arizona sun, we're talking about East Coast sun that's really different. Full sun actually means full sun. Better not have any afternoon shade. Also, plants don't do fantastically well when they're grown in rocks. And there is a reason for all the rock walls in New England. The area that was turned into agricultural lands, to be turned into agricultural lands, the farmers had to do something with all the rocks in the ground. And that became rock walls everywhere. But I had picked out my spot and I planted my garden. So the next year, a tree was removed because I needed more sun. The year after that, all but the biggest rocks were removed and organic material was generously added to the soil. I planted around the biggest rocks that were too big for me to tackle, and I considered them garden sculpture. But still, I was fighting nature in what and where I planted things. If I liked what the plant looked like, then by all means, I planted it. Never mind that it would be a constant battle getting it to grow. And it didn't end up looking like the picture on the little tag they give you. About this time, my neighbors, both from down and across the road, had begun to drop by, look at what I was trying to do, started giving me bits of advice that they had gained from their own years of successes. Things like, you might find it would do better on the north side, or you might give it some elbow room, or that really doesn't grow in Connecticut at all. All trying to help the lady from Arizona who had no idea how to garden in New England and who went with what she wanted, not what the environment would support. Well, I can be pretty stubborn, but I can also see I was beating my head against one of those many stone walls. I can learn. A few years later, I had some of the most rewarding, abundant gardens that not only fed my stomach, but it also feeding my soul and my spirit. I started going along with what would do well where I was trying to grow it. So, one of my versions of learning to go with nature rather than against it. Not very philosophical, but it's practical. And I was so much happier when the garden wasn't a constant failing fight, but rather it rewarded me with so much beauty as well as nourishment and zucchini for all of my neighbors. And now, please join Katie as she leads us in song, Morning Has Broken. And this morning, Katie is accompanied on both this hymn and our final hymn by our pianist, David Berry. Thank you.
Morning has come, arise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope pure shines upon each face.
morning. Today I would like to read for you Mateo Finds His Wow. This is a story of wonder and gratitude. Why does it have to rain on a Saturday? Asked Mateo. It's not fair. There's nothing to do. He grumbled to Papa. Mateo had already used up his screen time for the day. Can I have 30 more minutes, please? You know the rules, Papa answered. Why don't you help me in the kitchen? Boring, replied Mateo. What's Lucas up to? Maybe you could play with him, Papa suggested. I guess so, Mateo said with a sigh. Mateo opened the bedroom door and found Lucas building a fort for his toys. Arg! Mateo said, Lucas is messing up all my stuff, he yelled as he yanked his dinosaur and his baseball glove from Lucas and returned them to his side of the room. Why do I even have to share a room, he asked himself. None of my friends has to. Mateo stomped out into the hall and saw Mama tuning her guitar. Mama, he whined, can I? Don't even ask, Mama said. You'll find something to do. Mateo grabbed a notebook and he plopped into a chair. No, I won't, he shot back as he clenched a pencil and scrawled out a list of all the things that he couldn't do. Can't go swimming, can't ride his bike or go to the park or play baseball. Mateo sat and sulked. He huffed and he puffed loudly. His brain felt stuck. Mateo looked up from his list. The window in front of him had completely fogged up. He reached over to wipe it clean, but stopped himself when he felt the cold glass. Curious, he swirled his fingers across the window, leaving behind a dewy trail. Mateo experimented with his new drawing surface. He didn't feel so stuck anymore. Mateo leaned back to admire his work and caught a glimpse of something moving outside. A hummingbird hovered around its feeder. The rain didn't seem to bother it at all. The tiny acrobat flittered and fluttered. It flew forward and backwards and even side to side, flapping its wings so quickly they blurred. It darted up and down a few more times before pulling away from the feeder. And just like that, the aerial performance was over. Mateo felt tingles of delight all over. Wow, little bird, that was amazing. Thanks for the show. Mateo took a deep breath. The smell of chilies and garlic filled the air. He turned to see a plate of chilaquiles, his favorite. Wow, Papa, thanks for the stack of deliciousness. Mama's guitar played softly as she sang. Mateo recognized the lullaby she used to sing to him. He thought of bedtime stories and goodnight kisses. Wow, Mama, your voice feels like warm sunshine on my body. Thanks for the tune. Mateo peeked into their bedroom and saw that his toys had been carefully lined up on his bed. He watched Lucas wrap Chacho, his favorite truck, in a blanket and tuck it next to his stuffed animals, all while wearing underwear on his head. Mateo laughed. His heart smiled. Wow, Lucas, I'm sorry I grouched at you earlier. Thanks for taking such good care of my toys. Mateo wondered what other bits of wow were around. He could go looking for them on purpose. Mateo picked up his notebook and turned the page. He had something else to write. Thank you, Rain. There's wonder all around. Pay attention on purpose. What catches your eye? Zoom in, be curious, be amazed. I wish for you a day full of wow.
Well, that's wonderful. I think we can maybe all identify a bit with Mateo, although adults, if it gets to the point that you're wearing underwear on your head, please reach out for help. Um, this is the point at which in the service we would typically pass the offering plates. And so I want to first thank the folks who, those of us who are able to continue our giving, those who have done so. You've been amazing, and thank you for keeping it up as long as you're able. You can text your donation there to the number on the screen, or you can mail a check to our physical address. However, as I've been saying every Sunday, if you've had a change in employment or a change in income for some other reason and you're unable to continue your giving, what we need from you is just to communicate with us. Let us know that you need to stop your giving for now, and let us know how we can help, because that's the point of a congregation, especially in times like these, is to connect one another with the holy and to be there for each other. So again, please let us know if you can't continue your giving, but thank you for those who can and have. And as always, no matter what form your generosity takes, whether it's contributing your talents or your time or your finances, thank you as always for your generosity. Well, we're about to enter into a time of meditation, time of prayer, where we intentionally slow down for a few moments. And especially in these times, uh, really focus on alleviating that anxiety, at least temporarily, that's in the background for all of us right now. You're welcome to post joys or concerns in the chat room. I'd ask that you please avoid using the chat room for other purposes right now, so that people like me who have easily distracted minds don't get too distracted. So we're going to begin our time of meditation and prayer with a cello piece that is being offered by our worship associate this morning, Barbara Metz.
Blake, we need the sound turned on.
Yep, having some technical difficulties here.
Okay.
Getting software doesn't like to keep the volume up for some reason. Sorry about that. Here. There we go. This is the beginning.
My offering, Camille Saint-Saëns, the Swan.
First, let us take just a moment to hold in our hearts the concerns that were placed in the chat just now. There are a number of us in this congregation who have healthcare workers as family, and so we're worried about them, holding them in our hearts, holding them in prayer. I'm praying for a young member of our congregation who broke his arm, and for his parents who will have to take him to get his cast on Tuesday. Give thanks for David Shea's brother, who, although he had a terrible crash, he survived unharmed, and we're grateful for that. May we all work to stay connected and to demonstrate our love with action, even in these times. I want to invite you to join me in a spirit of prayer. This prayer was written by Vern Barnett, and it's entitled Earth Day Prayer in the Spirit of Indigenous Traditions. With Earth Day approaching, we're reminded in these times of our responsibility to care for the earth and our interconnection with all life. So please join me in a spirit of prayer. Infinite Spirit, sometimes called Grandfather, Grandmother, Father Sky, Earth Mother, Creator, we gather to praise your creation, to honor the swimmers and the crawlers, the four-legged and the winged ones. We give thanks for the beauty and glory of creation and open our hearts to new ways to understand our place in the universe, not the center or focus, but a humble and balanced place where every step we take becomes a prayer, where every word we say makes harmony with the vast, vibrating cosmos, and where we know we're singing the song of life. We pray to know more deeply that we're in the garden where every plant and animal and speck of dust is a living prayer. Without our brothers and sisters of the plant and animal and mineral kingdoms, the human family would end. So we want to bless them as they bless us. We pray for humility, not to humble ourselves before presidents or priests, but before the ants and the trees. For if we cannot be in true relation to the ant, we shall be outcasts of the garden. Let us cast the pollution from our eyes so we can see the glory and live with thanksgiving. Great Spirit, let us remember it is not how we talk, but how we walk. When we say we love animals, let us protect them. When we say that we love the plant people, let us honor them by living lightly on the earth. When we say we love the minerals, let us use them only in necessity and remember their rightful places. Oil belongs in the ground, not in the air through our wasteful machines. Wondrous trees breathing life into the atmosphere, your gifts of fire and shelter, fruit and sailing are precious to us. And in many ways, you offer us leaves of knowledge. May the vision of mutual interrelatedness, cosmic interdependence, the seamless process of generations, not end in cough-filled skies blotting the sun, but rather may clean air, healthy forests, wholesome water, expansive prairie, and pungent earth nourish paths for all creatures through mountain and valley and the salt sea, and through a protective atmosphere as we rejoice in the inhabitants. Hear and empower our mantra, reduce, reuse, recycle. With thanks for the surprise and mystery of it all, we pray in the name of the Creator, the processes and presences, and in the names of all our relations. May it be so. Amen.
I am a child of this universe. The ocean dance voices at my feet. The wind plays a melody through my hair. I'm loved at every turn. I am kissed by Mother Earth. I am a child of this universe. The sun warms me in its embrace. The stars have aligned for me in the sky. I am honored by your light. I am held by Father Time. Every blade of grass, every shaking leaf on a tree, every mountain top sings of the glory of God moving through me. I am a child of this universe. Through my breath, all of life can breathe. I plant the seeds with my every dream. I can love at every turn. Give a kiss to Mother Earth. Yes, I am a child of this universe. I greet the God in each face. I am a channel for peace to flow. Oh, I honor all of life. Yes, I'm one with Father Time. To every blade of grace, to every shaking leaf on a tree, every mountain top sings of the glory of God moving through, oh, moving us and me, moving as you
Well, thank you to Katie for doing so much work to get the music. That's been the hardest part of getting the worship services where we want them, is figuring out the music. And Katie's doing an amazing job. And I just want to stop for a moment and just have us notice where we are and what we're doing. You all have done an amazing job of taking the leap from being almost all in person to almost all online. We're working hard to stay connected. We're doing our best to help folks who weren't familiar with the technology, get them on board. This community is strong and continues to care for one another. And that's because every one of you are taking action, are making significant changes. And I'm just amazed again and again by the spirit of this community. Thank you for who you are and for all you're doing in these times. Well, this morning I want to talk a little bit about Taoism. And I think that Eastern religions in general have so much to teach us Westerners, maybe especially right now. Although there are parts of Taoism, for example, that I think we can't really access because we don't live in ancient China, a study of Taoism's writings yields wisdom that has a lot to teach us several thousand years after the masters wrote. I'm learning that the wisdom from Taoism and the wisdom from historians and anthropologists intersect in some interesting ways. I've been reading this incredible book called Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. He traces our history through the time when there were several species of humans, to when our species, Homo sapiens, won out, right through to today. But there's one part of the book that I keep returning to. It seems especially pertinent right now. Harari describes the roving forager clans of early Homo sapiens history as the world's first affluent societies. The foragers lived in small bands of about a dozen or 24 people. They scoured the forest for berries and roots and termites and hunted animals for food, and so had a varied diet that contributed to their generally good health. Gathering only took up a few hours most days, and so people had plenty of time to play games and tell stories, and importantly, Harari reminds us they had time to learn to gossip, which became really important in figuring out who could be trusted and who couldn't and why. Of course, their lives weren't always easy. They might have to run from a wild animal now and then. But they do seem, these lives, to have been meaningful and fulfilling to the people who lived them. Our forager foreparents built an incredible bank of knowledge about their surroundings that was passed down generation after generation. Almost none of us knows as much about our natural surroundings as they did. Harari calls them wandering bands of storytellers, these people who really lived in harmony with the natural world. Things were that way, more or less, for 2.5 million years of human history. Then came the agricultural revolution, about 10,000 years ago, when, as Harari writes, quote, sapiens began to devote almost all their time and effort to manipulating the lives of a few animal and plant species. From sunrise to sunset, humans sowed seeds, watered plants, plucked weeds from the ground, and led sheep to prime pastures, end quote. Sapiens believed this manipulation of the earth and its living beings would bring us unequaled prosperity and happiness. In fact, that's the story a lot of historians have told. Sapiens got smarter and smarter and eventually were smart enough even to farm. And they say farming made possible everything from books to burgers to Bohemian Rhapsody. But Harari calls the agricultural revolution history's biggest fraud. That's because the agricultural revolution was supposed to make life easier. If a person could get the earth to produce grain or potatoes without having to forage, they could stay in one place. And that allowed them to build villages, for example, to accumulate wealth and trade with other groups, go to war with other groups. All of that, or most of it, should have made life easier. But it also led to a less varied diet, more disease, and, as Harari writes, quote, population explosions and pampered elites. The average farm worker worked harder than the average forager and got a worse diet in return, end quote. For this reason, Harari dismisses the old story that humanity became farmers because they got smarter. He says they were seduced by the promise of luxury, an easier life, and they passed down methods of farming until each generation knew a little less about how to forage for their food. Eventually, the old way of life was completely forgotten. No matter how unhappy or even miserable people might become, it was impossible to go back. Here's the paragraph I keep returning to, and forgive me for an extended reading, but I really want to share this with you. Harari writes, quote, the pursuit of an easier life resulted in much hardship, and not for the last time. It happens to us today. How many young college graduates have taken demanding jobs in high-powered firms, vowing that they'll work hard to earn money that will enable them to retire and pursue their real interests when they're 35. But by the time they reach 35, they have large mortgages, children to school, houses in the suburbs that necessitate at least 2 cars per family, and the sense that life is not really worth living without really good wine and expensive holidays abroad. What are they supposed to do? Go back to digging up roots rather? No, they double their efforts and keep slaving away. And he continues, one of history's few iron laws is that luxuries tend to become necessities and to spawn new obligations. Over the last few decades, we've invented countless time-saving devices that are supposed to make life more relaxed. Washing machines, vacuum cleaners, dishwashers, telephones, mobile phones, computers, email. Previously, it took a lot of work to write a letter, address it, and take it to the mailbox. Back in the snail mail era, people usually only sent letters when they had something important to relate. Rather than writing the first thing that came into their heads, they considered carefully what they wanted to say and how to phrase it. Today, he says, I receive dozens of emails each day, all from people who expect a prompt reply. We thought we were saving time. Instead, we revved up the treadmill of life to 10 times its former speed and made our days more anxious and agitated. End quote. By the way, this is a young person writing this. In the fight against COVID-19, electronic communication has become essential as we try to stay connected. We're still a storytelling species, and we need to tell our stories to those we love. Still, with so much of our lives on pause, we've been given a moment in time to reflect on what we had been up to and whether our former lifestyles were right for us. Had we become too seduced by luxury to see that our lives had become impossibly overscheduled? Was all the work required to maintain our lifestyles leading us to ignore what was most important? Family, relationships, civic responsibilities, and duty to neighbor. Was the epidemic of senior loneliness related to people of working age working too much to pay attention to our elder relatives? As we approach Earth Day, we should ask, was what we were doing to our planet worth returning to? No, I don't think we're going to go back to digging up roots for food. If I thought that, I'd be hightailing it out of the desert for sure. But what if we could move the needle a little more toward wholeness, away from individuality and a couple ticks toward community and interdependence? What if you and I decided that our lives were going to be lived more in harmony with the world around us? Maybe it would be important first to shift some big things about our mindsets. We Westerners have largely internalized the idea that the world is in need of saving. It's the core of traditional religion, maybe especially conservative Christianity, in which God is repulsed by the world and requires a human sacrifice to make it right again. And if the earth is in need of saving, then it is not holy in itself. We can use it how we like. People, too, are seen as impure, not naturally holy, and thus often as commodities. None of us has escaped unscathed by that line of thought. We're constantly trying to tame the earth and all its animals to make them serve our desire for an easier life. I'm pretty sure there's an argument in here that would have me never weeding my yard again. And I really like that, Heather. I hope you're listening. But we carry that thinking into every facet of our lives if we're not careful. At my worst in that regard, I become a social media justice warrior, changing the world from behind my keyboard. I've been there the past couple weeks, I'm ashamed to say, trying to change people's opinions by posting just the right thing. But the truth is, I have very limited control over such things. What would the Taoist masters say to me, to the person who works out their anxiety by trying to change other people? Well, there's some nuance here. My understanding of Taoism wouldn't have me never posting anything political. It would instead instruct me to first pay attention to the world. What's happening? What is the way things are going? And then notice, given the world that I live in, and it can be no other, what actions can I take and where should I be still? The symbol of yin yang is instructive here. The black sort of almost looks like a comma, and then the white comma that fits with beside. Some say the yin yang symbol symbolizes the balance between good and evil, but that's not quite right. Since nature doesn't recognize good or evil, Taoism doesn't spend a whole lot of time on that concept either. Instead, think of yin and yang, the black and white commas, if you will, as passivity and action. There's a time for each. A life with only passivity or only action would be meaningless and unfulfilling. Wisdom is in, again, paying attention to the way things are and discerning when it's time to act and when it's time to be still. How do we do that? Well, first, it's important to empty oneself of all that blocks us from being in touch with our world. It's been hard to watch as we parents are called on to become teachers in our homes, replacing the work of trained professionals who, I hope we see now, deserve much better pay. And more importantly, shifting roles from a parent who mostly needs to calm children during this time to enforcers and supervisors of schooling. And I'm not blaming anyone. It's hard for school districts, for teachers, and for us parents to know what to do right now. But I do notice that in this instance and in so many others, we've approached this time, this temporary pause, by filling our schedules as close to the normal amount as possible. In fact, for some of us, we're working more now than we did before. Still, even now, we struggle to listen to the way of things and follow it. And I get it, there are practical considerations, but a little more Taoism might put us in good stead right now. Maybe especially this advice from Wang Tzu, the ancient philosopher. He said, "Do not make plans. Do not be absorbed by activities. Do not think that you know. Be aware of all that is and dwell in the infinite. Wander where there is no path. Be all that heaven gave you, but act as though you have received nothing. Be empty. That is all." I know I've shared with you before the wisdom attributed to the Christian reformer Martin Luther. Somebody once asked him how much he prayed, and as the saying goes, as the story goes, he said, "A half hour each morning, unless I'm really busy, and then I pray an hour." Don't think of it as prayer if you would rather not. Think of it as emptying ourselves of things that block our realization that everything is connected and that we're a part of everything. If anxious times require more of that, and I think they do, then it would seem that this time requires much more than our usual prayer or meditation or focus time, whatever that is. And that requires us not to simply replicate our busy schedules inside our homes, but to really discern what we can let go of, to make room simply to process the time we're in, to live in this moment. So I want to suggest one thing to myself and to all of us. Let us abandon the question of when we go back to normal. Oh, I've tried to pontificate about that on social media. The truth is, none of us knows, and none of us in this worship service this morning has a lot of control over that. When we resume public life, it will not be as it was, not exactly. It may be much better, and in fact, that's my guess. Eventually, it will be much better. But that's not what's happening now. For now, our former life has ceased, and this life, this day, is the only one we have. Today, as it is, what is the way of life, and how will you follow it given our current limitations? What is the way of destruction and death for you? For me, it's Twitter. What is it for you? And how will you avoid it? I keep hearing from people who say they had big plans for quarantine. They were going to read a book or write a book or complete a home project or something else, but they can't seem to be productive. My big plan was to become excellent at the banjo, and it doesn't hurt my wife's feelings at all that I have not worked on that much. Why? because that just isn't the way things are going. Friends, that just has to be okay. It is the world as we have it now. If we learn to live a little more slowly now, it will serve us and the earth well whenever life returns to some semblance of normalcy, and it will. I conclude by repeating the words of Huang Tzu. Do not make plans. Do not be absorbed by activities. Do not think that you know. Be aware of all that is and dwell in the infinite. Wander where there is no path. Be all that heaven gave you, but act as though you have received nothing. Be empty. That is all. May it be so. Amen. Now we're going to sing together one more hymn, and the words to this hymn were written by Confucius. They were brought over into Taoism, sort of imported in various ways. But the hymn is actually in the Unitarian Universalist hymnal. It's entitled, Grieve Not Your Heart.
Grieve not your heart for want of place, nor yearn for easy praise, but feed yourself some task to do, and well employ your days. From wise and foolish, both alike, we should all try to learn, for one can show us how to live, the other what to spurn. Be fair to people when they err, when good your pleasure show. Their faults be quick to understand, in judging them be slow. But this above all else obey, it is the best of goals. What you would wish not done to you, do not to other souls.
I would point out real quickly the difference between the Golden Rule and Confucius writings. The Golden Rule says, do unto others what you would have them do unto you, but Confucius said, don't do to other people what you don't wish done to yourself. I think there's value in reflecting on those words of Confucius. Well, would invite you now to draw that chalice near again as we come to the end of our time together this morning. And let's extinguish our chalice as we read the words together. Though we extinguish the chalice, our connection to each other and this community remains. May its light guide us this week as we walk the path of justice, speak words of love, and fill our world with compassion until we meet again. And now, dear friends, may life bless you and keep you. May the Spirit make its face to shine on you and be gracious unto you. May the universe pour out the fullness of its blessings on you and bring you peace. Go in peace to serve love itself and to serve one another. But don't go too far. If you want to stay around and connect with a few other folks, now is that time. We're going to give everyone about a minute. If you'd like to leave, if you need to leave, we certainly understand that. But in just a moment, if you stick around, you'll receive an invitation to join a break.